Statistics tell us that excess deaths now for this period of the crisis are 53,000. It's a huge number. And I say that on a day when the blame game has now begun, because the row over the care home catastrophe, as some see it, is reaching such a level that for the first time we're actually getting some pretty aggressive journalistic questions of ministers, and it would appear that ministers are starting to blame scientists and a little bit of vice versa. But there's one really big question in my mind, and one that none of the journalists at these daily 5 p.m. press briefings ever seem to ask. Joining me is Ben Kentish, LBC's Westminster correspondent. Ben, I never hear this question asked, and yet lots of my friends and colleagues text me, WhatsApp me and say, where is Boris Johnson?
Nigel, it wasn't asked at the press conference.
No, of course not.
I can tell you it was asked. It was asked at the lobby briefing that we have with Number 10 every day yesterday. Where is the Prime Minister?
Yeah.
It was put to his spokesman, given when it was announced that these conferences would be carried out every day, the suggestion from Number 10 was that he would be fronting not all of them, but certainly most of them. And yet I think he's done one, possibly two, in the last fortnight or so, 3 weeks since he came back to work.
Yep.
The answer was, frankly, there wasn't really an answer. The answer was this, that we have seen Boris Johnson once or twice, and we'll no doubt be seeing him again. That was the answer.
Well, aren't we lucky?
I do also notice, with no disrespect to George Eustace, that they started off, it was the very senior ministers that were doing these press conferences. We haven't seen Rishi Sunak for some time. We haven't seen Michael Gove for some time. They have recently tended to put up slightly more junior cabinet ministers, and I wonder, alongside only one scientific advisor, it does feel a bit like they're not prioritising these as much as they were at the start.
Well, they're hoping we get bored, I think, and don't ask lots of questions in our own minds. And talking of that press conference, of course, George Eustace, environment, the contentious issue of fruit picking, which I'm going to talk about later on today. Did he have much to offer as to how we're going to get the crop in this year?
Well, he set up a new scheme, Nigel, Pick for Britain, which is a website that people can go to, and they're hoping some furloughed workers might do this, to try and fill the jobs that are effectively vacant for picking the crop this summer. Problem was, as soon as he announced it, the website, I went straight to it, and it had gone down, saying this service is unavailable, which is the message that farmers have been trying to get across for some weeks now, because there is this shortage. So that is the plan. That's the plan for picking the fruit. There'll be another plan needed for where it goes, because a lot of the fresh fruit produce that the UK grows, in fact, goes to big corporate, it goes to big events, it goes to restaurants, of course, and there are going to be a shortage of buyers as well as pickers. Big problems for the farming industry, and more for George Eustace to announce, I think, in the coming days. Well,
I will talk more about that at 6:30, particularly in light of what Prince Charles had to say on this subject earlier on today. And during the press conference, did you get the sense, Ben, that a little bit of a blame game is beginning to emerge?
Yes, I did. It started this morning, of course, Nigel, when Therese Coffey, the Work and Pension Secretary, went slightly off script, I think it's fair to say, and said, well, if we got decisions wrong, then it was because the science was wrong. Number 10 were quite quick to slap that down, making clear that scientists advise and ministers decide was the phrase Boris Johnson's spokesman used. But it will not have gone down well at all with the UK scientific advisors or the wider scientific community. And I actually thought it was possibly the most astonishing press conference we've had yet, because Dame Angela McLean, the Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor, told it exactly how she was. There was no attempt to sugarcoat things. She said we weren't testing enough because the capacity wasn't in place. She said the testing system here still wasn't good enough compared to other countries, and that was an operational issue, not a scientific one. And frankly, the tone of her comments was really that things have gone wrong above and beyond the scientific advice, and she pointed the blame very much at ministers.
Yes.
I thought it was much more frank than any scientific advisor to the government has been during this epidemic.
I couldn't agree more, Ben. Thank you. And we have been used, of course, to Chris Whitty being quite frank with us, but far less so from the government. And one Tory MP, unnamed, has likened this crisis to the famous Morecambe and Wise comedy sketch where composer Andre Previn tells Eric Morecambe he's playing all the wrong notes. To which Morecambe responds, no, I'm playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. And that was in answer to, because we keep being told we took all the right decisions at the right time. And I've said over and again that at least people like President Macron have been on television and levelled with the French public that they made mistakes. We don't get any of that from the government. But today, well, today we did begin to see something very, very interesting. From the start, we've been told we are following the science.